Sounds good.
And it looks like I'm recording.
It does.
Cool. All right. Okay. Well, hey there, Allie.
Hey, Vince. How are you doing?
Hey, well, thanks. As of the last 2 minutes that we've been apart here. So yes, if we seem a little vibrant today out there, winos, it is because we are already a full glass in, hanging out with some Rombauer Chardonnay. So if you want to go see Allie's channel, A Glass After Work, you guys got to go check her out so that you can see our Rombauer Chardonnay review. I was totally impressed by this. I think we were both really impressed by how much quality went into this wine, and I'm really, really excited for the next, just to see if they can keep that level of quality with their red.
I'm looking forward to it too.
Right on. Okay, so here we have our 2018 Rombauer Zinfandel. So we're just going to go ahead and dive right into it. Let's get the cork popped on this bad boy.
I don't know if you've noticed, I will just point out, this is not normally a thing that I care about, but I love the corks. It says the joy of wine on the cork, and I thought that was real fun.
That is really cool. Yeah, one thing that we didn't talk about in the last, in the Chardonnay review is the presentation of the bottle. And one thing I'll tell you about the presentation here is I don't know necessarily that it is like the most eye-catching, most interesting label that I've ever seen, but it is so recognizable, I think, is one of the important things. This is easily Rombauer. In fact, I went into a Total Wine to find my wines, and I knew them instantly because of that really royal blue capsule there, and then just that yellow contrast here. It screams, "Hi, look at me, I'm Rombauer."
It's that, I think it's that yellow in particular too, right? Like you just don't see many labels that look like that.
Absolutely. But yeah, with that, let's get some Zin poured here. Wow, right on. And check that out. One of the things I can tell you is that I think I was expecting this to be really dark in my glass, and it's not. This has a kind of a medium concentration on there. It's like a ruby red. You can see it's really beautiful reds kind of coming through there. Now, certainly it is dark, as I would expect from a Zinfandel, but I'm getting a lot of really pretty, just ruby reds underneath that.
I would have expected a little more purple than we're getting, and it's not. There isn't really much purple, at least in mine, at all. It is nice, like you said, nice ruby, but not. I can still see the bottom of my glass, so it's not so deep that I can't see the bottom.
Okay, as we talked about in the Chardonnay review, there is the Rombauer Chardonnay is like a staple of Chardonnay. When people talk about style of Chardonnay, they use Rombauer as like the pinnacle of what the buttery, oaky Chardonnay should be like. And certainly we understand why. As you and I found, there was some really beautiful complexity on there, it's definitely worth the buy. I have no idea what people say about Zinfandel Chardonnay. Have you heard anything about it? Or Zinfandel? Rombauer.
I haven't heard much about their Zinfandel. I've heard people talk about their cabs, but what I will say is that the Zins have won a number of awards. Like, if you put stock into ratings from wine enthusiasts or that sort of thing, their Zins are always racking up nice points there. I'm a big Zinfandel fan, so I was very excited to try to grab this instead of a Cabernet. I feel like Zins are very California, they're very picky in that they can get jammy or way too big, way too fast. So
and I think I associate sort of that big body with that really purple color that you were talking about and that deepness. So I'm really hoping that this is going to have a little bit more complexity and a little bit more maybe minerality to it. Let's just check it out. Let's take the nose.
All right. There's a lot going on that nose.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll tell you right away, certainly the fruit is big, but it's not the only thing, and it might not even be the first thing that hits me is the fruit. Again, I'm expecting this sort of classic jam in your face, and that's not the first thing that's getting me here.
No, I'm actually getting baking spices and sweet tobacco more than I am getting, not that I'm not getting the fruit, because the fruit is definitely there, but there is some nice, like, earthy notes.
There's totally earthy notes. There's like this leathery thing happening in here and a little bit of like dried flower petals. It's almost giving me like a potpourri sense and not so much, again, of that like immediate black licorice and star anise and, all that, crazy deep, jam out there.
Oh, I agree. There's definitely like that dried flower, some of those dried potpourri notes for sure.
Wow, that's really pretty. But then, yeah, there's a classic sort of, like baked pie underneath that, right? The blackberry, raspberries kind of jam underneath that. So before
and some of those blueberry notes, some of that, I still getting a little bit of that IHOP syrup, which I associate, there's like that boysenberry IHOP syrup note that I just associate with Zinfandel.
Okay, I said it on our Chardonnay video, but I want to say it here too. One of the reasons why I'm so excited to taste with you is because I love the way you taste. I love the way that you talk about wine. You connect people with wine, I think, so well. I think your descriptors are really cool, and you make it look so easy. Sometimes I have to take a couple takes to go, gosh, what am I really getting out of here? And, you just flow through it, and I'm really impressed by that. So it's really exciting for me to be able to taste with you.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Okay, and speaking of taste, let's get this on the palate.
Let's do it. Cheers.
Cheers. I have a problem.
Okay. I'd love to hear it. What is it?
I have a problem. I think that the thing that made the Chardonnay so approachable is hurting this Zinfandel. It is certainly complex, which is great. You've got some really great earthiness that we can confirm on the palate that we got on the nose. You've got these really great baking spices like you called, florals like I called. You've got all this, all that really great complexity. It is all muted and drowned out by oak, in my opinion. That is one of the first things that has hit me here. It hit me, and I didn't even get it as much on the nose. I didn't even think about oak on the nose. The second it hit my palate, I was like, where? Don't go away, don't go away, don't go away. Oh, where'd you go? It's all being flooded away by this oakiness. Now, whether or not, that's a good thing or bad thing, it's definitely preferential, I would imagine. But I'm really I'm slightly disappointed here by the fact that, I lost some of that complexity.
So I think, I would agree in that I think there are some really good notes. This is kind of like a dig into wine, and I can sit here and pick out a lot of different flavors. I enjoy it. Here's my problem with it, is that I paid a lot of money for this wine.
Yes. Okay. How much did you pay? I paid $36 for this one.
So I might have paid $41.
Ooh, yeah.
I might have actually hit over the $40 mark on this one. You know what? I have to go back and look. I think I paid $41 for this one. And I just feel like this doesn't taste to me like a $41 wine. I enjoy this. This is fine for an everyday wine, but not a $41 wine. To your point, it doesn't have finesse. And maybe the way you described it is it being over oaked a little bit might be where that comes out for me. This is more like a $28, maybe $28, maybe even like maybe 21, like maybe under that 25 mark.
Like you're 18. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like I don't feel like I'm getting what I paid for out of it. So my expectations were high.
Yeah, certainly, especially after the bar that the Chardonnay set for us. And, hopefully I'm not, destroying, the anticipation of watching the first video, but we had a lot to talk about that Chardonnay. So you winos better go check out that video. It is really interesting how much there was to offer there, and definitely exciting, worth a view. But the bar was set high. Then we get to this, and the word clunky comes to mind. There are two wines in this bottle. They are very ripped apart. There is a wine that shows you terroir and earth and complexity and all those really beautiful things, and then there's a wine that shows you nothing but oak and cream and vanilla and raspberry pie, and they are not playing along really nicely. Now, one of the things that may contribute to this is that check out that vintage. This is a 2018 wine. This is super young, and again, Rombauer is so popular that I imagine that this is what they have left. This is like, we got to push this wine out because people are ready to buy it. I can imagine laying this down for a while and just kind of seeing where it starts to go.
So I was going to actually ask you about that, especially because as I'm sitting here, right, like we're talking and I'm swirling and tasting a little more. The more I aerate it a little bit, the more some of the other, especially like the white pepper in mine really is coming out a little more. And so it makes me wonder, because there are some good tannins, there is some good structure, that maybe a little bit of age and a little bit then of decanting might also help.
Okay, now I have to be clear here that I have a bit of a bias. I really am not a fruit bomb wine person. So I actually don't like young Zinfandel, and so I come in with a pre-bias here, but I love old Zinfandel. Old Zinfandel is one of my favorite wines, actually. That's how big the difference is to me. You get this jammy fruit bomb in the beginning, and then later in life, they are so elegant and just so, I'll use your word, they show so much finesse and so much complexity later on in life. And I think this would greatly benefit from that. I will admit on that second, I took one sip and made a judgment. On that second sip, it is a little bit more toned down. The more I spend time with it, I'm not as daunted by that oaking. I'm not as offended by the oak, but it's not black pepper. You're right. It's white pepper. It's not that.
I think it's more like a white pepper.
Yeah, it's more like this sort of almost minerally pepper. And it is really nice, but I still think that it's too young. It's too young right now.
And this definitely, there's no doubt about it. There's still fruit bomb happening in this. So if you're not looking for that kind of wine, I would either, like you said, age it. I don't have a lot of space. I live in a townhouse in DC, so there's not a lot of space for aging. Pretty much what we buy, we drink. I have a few exceptions to that, one of which actually happens to be Zinfandels. My first trip to Napa, I ended up tasting red Zins for the first time and joined Storybook Mountains Wine Club. And so I only get 3 of their bottles in my shipment, but I do keep those to see how they age. But that was my first experience with aging Zinfandels.
Yeah.
And that does actually make a difference.
Let's talk a little bit about how this feels on the palate.
Yeah. So I thought that I was a little surprised there aren't as many tannins. I'm not getting as much gum pull, and I thought I was going to get a little more of that, especially considering that it is a little on the darker side. And maybe that is what bothers me a little bit about it more than anything else, is that I want a little from a Zin, from a young Zin, from a big Zin. Right. I want a little more gum pull. Yeah, grit. I do. I want it to be chewy. I'm not feeling like I'm chewing
no
through
weak
this wine
wines for
point.
You. No weak wines for Allie. She has a glass after work, so that's got to be a glass that's worth it. I like it. Okay. In that regard, I will disagree a little bit. In that regard, that's actually the thing that, and again, it's all preferential. There's no, it's just your preference versus my preference. I'm actually okay with that. I love the way this hits my palate. If anything, I wish that the flavors that came with it matched the way that it feels, because you're right. You're absolutely right. There's not a lot of tannin, and in place of that, there's a lot of acidity. After every sip, my mouth just waters, which tells me that this is a really good food wine. And as far as that mouthfeel, I love, there's a lot of mid palate. It hits me in all the right places. It has that kind of, again, a peppery, minerally thing that almost dances on the palate. It's really nice. And that's all great. My problem is that there's a big rush of oak that drowns everything out with the flavor. And that's the part that really sort of disappoints me and that I'd like to see mellow out over the years.
Well, and I think that to that point, there isn't as much lingering in the finish. When we were talking about the Chardonnay, we really liked the finish of the Chardonnay. And
true.
There is not this kind of, I wouldn't say it's as bad as falling off the cliff, but I feel like I get everything up front, right? I get everything kind of hitting me all at once to think about, and it falls off a little bit in the back.
Now, who is this Zinfandel for?
I don't know. Who are the Zinfandel for?
Who would enjoy this?
You mean who? I thought you meant who are the 4 big producers of Zinfandel?
No.
I don't know.
Who are the 4? No. Who is this Zinfandel for?
So I think that is the bigger question, right? Because in DC, right, our summers are super hot and super muggy, and for the most part, you don't want to drink red wine. However, my exception to that happens to be Zinfandel, because I feel like Zinfandels go with cookouts and hamburgers and smoked ribs and right? And so you're out there eating these kind of hearty meats and having a good time and drinking and the Zins kind of go really, really well because they can hold up to all of that heavy, smoky wonderfulness. And so that's what I think of. For me, that, or they're for winter time when you're really, really, they're really warming. That's exactly it. So it's winter time, you're curled up with an Afghan and a book in front of a fireplace, and it's snowing outside. I'm sure you don't get much of that in California.
No,
but
not in my, this thing is 15.9% alcohol. And Zinfandels do tend to be, I mean, they need that heat. And so the more heat, the more sugar, the more alcohol that you're going to get, right? So they do tend to be high levels of alcohol. Typically, they can be up to 16, 17%, but yeah, you're usually not lower than 15.5. So certainly, yes, they are really warming in that sense. So in answering the question, who is this for? I would say this, and to your point, you were talking about being really, it's really hot out where you are, right? And so Zinfandels tend to hit the spot. A lot of people ask me for sweet wine. Can you recommend some sweet wines? I do turn them towards Zinfandel, and one of the reasons why I do that, this wine is probably 100% dry. It probably has no residual sugar, but I'll turn them to this because it's so fruity. Zins tend to be these fruit bombs we've been talking about. So on the palate and in our minds, we perceive all that fruit as sweetness. So even though it's dry, this is for Zinfandels, and this one in particular is for somebody who wants kind of a sweeter style wine. I would totally recommend this. And another person who this might be for is a new wine drinker. I think this is a perfect starter red wine because it introduces you to pepper, to complexity, to terroir, to minerality. It introduces you to all that stuff, but right before it can really scare you, it goes, oh, here's some oak just to chill you out, right? And it gives you that sweet vanilla oak. And so this is probably a great starter wine, and no wonder why I think Rombauer really knows what they're doing. Okay. Certainly I'll give you a chance to respond to that because I know I'm very verbose, but I also want to ask you a second question, which is, in our last review, we said, man, these are definitely good food wines. Do you feel like that still holds true with this?
So I do think that this is a good food wine, but I think it's a very particular type of food. I'll go back to the kind of smoked meat type of, barbecue, that sort of food. I think this would go really well with a Asian short rib in a crock pot type of dish, like something that's going to be really hearty.
Like a sandwich.
Oh, like a pulled pork sandwich, something like that. Like that's absolutely that's what you want with this. I think that there's a little bit of reminiscence of and I'd had this in a Pinotage recently, and maybe that's why I'm thinking about it. There's a little reminiscence of hoisin sauce in the taste. And I think it's that kind of plummy note, like a savory plummy note that I think does actually, if it's paired correctly, but I think that this is one of those wines that might actually be a little more difficult to pair. I wouldn't just put it with a beef stew because I think, to your point, it's a little too sweet.
Certainly, and okay, I definitely want to talk Pinotage with you, but that might be for another video. So okay. I'd love your opinion on Pinotage since you brought that up. Cool.
I have lots of opinions on Pinotage.
Aha! All right, I think we got our next collaboration, Allie. Okay, so with that, what do you think? How did this wine do? Do we like it?
I'm not going to dump out the bottle. Like, I like it. I'll drink it. I enjoy it. I'm probably not going to buy it again, especially not at this price point. Like,
I think it's well made. I like it. I don't like it for $41.
That's exactly it. But to your point, I think the reason I'm going to go back to something you said earlier. I think that there is something about it that makes it an easy drinker, especially for people who are a little more trying to figure out their footing in wine. Mm-hmm. And so if that's what you're talking about, like, I wouldn't, like, if you're going to a wine dinner, for example, like a work dinner, you don't know what people like, you're a little worried that, one person, your boss or whoever is really picky about wine, but you don't really know. I think that this is a crowd pleasing kind of wine that would go down really easily. It's not offensive, but it's not something personally that I would probably gravitate towards.
Sure, and you're not going to disappoint anybody with that bright yellow label either. They know what this is. I mean, it has the name already out there. So again, that was kind of my mission here, was to find out, is Rombauer worth the hype? I would have to say it's down to the wine drinker. That Chardonnay, certainly I would enjoy that. This Zinfandel, I will not pick this up again. I might pick up the Chardonnay though for the right occasion. So it just does depend on the preference. Allie, it's been fun drinking wine with you. Thank you so much for joining me. And I'll let the winos know. Go check out Allie. She's over there at A Glass After Work. She puts out new videos, on Wednesdays or how often?
On Wednesdays, Wednesday.
Wine Wednesday. So you guys got to go check her out for sure. And Allie, I hope to talk with you again soon. We got to talk Pinotage.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Vince. It's a lot of fun.
Cheers.
Cheers.
What do I say? Drink safely. And until next time, drink safe and drink well. Go drink well.
Drink well.
But